Hey y'all. Okay, this is a video about eyeshadow palettes. So on this side of the screen are my palettes. This is my existing palette collection. And on this side of the screen are all of the palettes that have come my way in PR recently. They're all trying to make their way into my collection. They're all contenders. And I think it's also time for me to look at my existing eyeshadow collection and assess it and just double check and make sure that I actually want to keep everything that's in it. So this is going to be kind of a combination palette collection, reckoning, and maybe declutter video if I decide to get rid of any of my existing shadows. Basically, I'm looking at everything new and old and deciding what I want to keep for the foreseeable future. I think what I'm going to do though is to start with the new ones, like start with a reckoning, rather than doing like a purge of my collection in advance of deciding what I want to keep. These days, I am trying to take a little bit more of a relaxed and natural approach. I really just want to keep what I love and pass along what I don't love without worrying too much about numbers or anything like that. Y'all, I almost just got right into the video. I forgot that I was doing an introduction. If this is your first time to my YouTube channel, then welcome. I'm so glad you clicked on this video. My name is Hannah and I love beautiful things. I really enjoy makeup, obviously, but I try not to buy too much, and I actually try even not to keep too much of what comes my way for review because I don't want to own way too much at any one time. So if beauty content with that philosophy underlying it sounds good to you, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. Now let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. Okay, this is all of the new stuff. This is actually in the wrong place though. This is the Alva 2 highlighter palette from Odin's Eye. I just put it in my stack when I shouldn't have because it's not an eyeshadow palette. So I'm gonna kick it out of this video. I'll reckon with it another time. Looking at what's here, I feel like fantasy is trending, which I actually think makes sense because of how strange and difficult the last year has been. I mean, everything has this sort of like sparkly, starry, soft, dreamy quality to it. And I think that that might be something that we continue to see. I hadn't really thought about it until this moment. Very pretty. I am attracted to this kind of dreamy aesthetic, but I do tend to prefer it when it's grounded in something, like the way that the aesthetic here is grounded in a sense of contemporary art and in dark colors. And the way that it's grounded here in a reference to the natural world, like a reference to the stratification of gems. I tend to prefer that over just this totally pastel, sparkly, illustrative fantasy that we have going on in the Odin's Eye palettes. But it's all very pretty. It's quite a pleasing little collection that we have here. And I think that what I need to do is just start with the ones that I absolutely know that I'm keeping. I'm definitely going to keep the Club Nebula palette, Angie's collab with Kaleidos. I absolutely love the packaging. I never thought that I would enjoy such thick, chunky packaging, but when it comes to this palette, I wouldn't have it any other way. I just think it's beautifully executed. I love the artwork. I love the matte finish. I love that it's a little bit soft feeling. I love the mechanism by which it opens and closes. It's just, I haven't even talked about the eyeshadows yet, but in every way, physically, it's very pleasing to have it in my collection. And that is something that is important to me. I love beautiful things for all sorts of reasons. And this is very beautiful. Here's the palette. I did do a review and demo of it. As you can see, I've been using it. My experience with it has been very positive. I find that it doesn't disappoint me in terms of my ability to get dimension in my looks because it has these dark mattes in it, but it also always pushes me in a slightly more colorful direction than I would naturally go. And I appreciate that. This is a real gem and I'm happy to keep it. The quality of the shadows too is pretty inspiring and exciting. The other thing that's here that I am unequivocally going to be keeping that you couldn't pry from my cold dead hands at this point is this palette, Samantha's palette with Ofra, the Life's a Draft palette. And it's simply because of this face product right here, this cheek. This is currently my favorite blush. It's the best powder blush I've used in a really long time. I think there you actually can get a pretty good sense of why I love it so much. Do you see how it's sheared out and it's so glossy? So there's that kind of fleshy color there and that glossiness. I just feel like it looks so much like a really beautiful glossy cream cheek, but it has the ease of application of a powder. Especially for me lately, I have blemishes. I'm trying to add color to my cheeks without picking up too much of the spot conceal that I've put down on my blemishes. And I've found that this is easier for me to work with than my cream cheeks, but it gives me that glossy shine that I'm after. I'm just so impressed by this, and I've worn it almost every day since it arrived. I like the eyeshadows too. I'm not mad at them. The formula is good. And I have been dipping into them from time to time just because they're convenient colors to have around. So I've got this sitting on my vanity because I'm reaching for the blush so often. And then, I dip into it to deepen up a look or to blur my crease or something like that. But the reason that I am so confidently keeping this, the reason that I really, really want to keep it is this product right here. And the rest of these, I'm not sure about. I think I'm going to actually open them all up so I can kind of see what I'm dealing with color-wise, color story-wise. All right, it's a little awkward, but I managed to get all of the eyeshadows in the frame, I think. And I'm glad that I did this because it really does help me. It has helped me kind of clear my head about it. Let's talk about these palettes from Odin's Eye first. So this one I haven't touched, and it's very pretty. I've actually been pretty impressed. This is the first time I've tried Odin's Eye. They sent me all of these palettes. I've been pretty impressed by the eyeshadows. If they had just sent me this, for example, like if they had only sent me this little palette, I'd probably keep it just because I know that I can get good looks out of it. Some of these colors are really pretty. The formula is good, etc. But because I have other Odin's Eye palettes on offer, and because I haven't touched this, so I can give it away untouched, and also because I just kept the Club Nebula palette. Like everything that I could do with this, I could do with Club Nebula. For all of those reasons, it's easy for me to just give this one away. These other two small ones, I really enjoyed using both of them. One of the things that impressed me, possibly the thing that impressed me the most about these, is that those really bright shades in the center, that split pan, is so shiny, like so incredibly shiny, and really lights up a look. That is just pretty fierce. Actually, that probably shows the quality better than anything. I started to wipe it off, and the pigment, it's like this kind of crushy mica. It got dispersed and spread out, and just look how glossy that shine is. It's so pretty. I have other glossy, shiny things in my collection. I have other neutral eyeshadow, other red eyeshadow. I have other green eyeshadow. I think that I can happily pass these along, even though I enjoyed them so much, and even though those center shades really excite me. I don't need them. I don't feel like I'll miss them if I don't keep them. Let's look at these three big palettes. These are such fun, pretty palettes that it's a little bit harder to decide to let them go than it was with the little ones, the minis. The other thing about them is that they're very satisfyingly designed. Like they have this sort of slightly soft quality. It's like there's a little bit of padding, just a little bit inside of the cover. So they just feel very juicy to hold. I really like the way that they've designed these physically. So I like them. They feel neat and solid and just attractive. And again, that contributes to my desire to keep them and own them. The first one that I can easily just eliminate is this one. Even though it's so pretty, it's the most neutral. In theory, it's the one that I would like get the most use out of in the day-to-day. I have other shades like this. You know what I mean? Like this isn't original to my collection. It is a really beautiful palette for yellows. Like these yellows are really pretty. And I do think that the mattes are really good from Odin's Eye. But I've had this in my possession for some weeks now, if not over a month, and I haven't really wanted to use this. I haven't been inspired to reach for it. So I'm just going to give it away. I swatched it a tiny bit. I like these bronzes and I really like bronze, but I found that these deeper bronzes in here, all of them lean quite warm, like really orangey bronzes. If they hadn't leaned so warm, then that would have maybe made me think twice about giving this away. But as it is, I'm perfectly happy to give it as a gift. Now, of these remaining two, again, in theory, this is the one that I would like better because I think that if I were to design an eyeshadow palette, it would be more likely to end up looking like this than to end up looking like this. I'm not saying it would end up looking like this. I'm just saying that this is the likelier of the two because it has these deep, murky mattes. It has this kind of like mixed, sparkly, glossy amber shade. It has this really interesting grubby kind of green, pale green. There's just a lot to love about this palette. There's a lot for me to love about it. I think it's really cool. But of all of the palettes that Odin's Eye has sent me, this is the one that I immediately opened and started using, that I keep reaching for during makeup playtime, that I've actually worn on camera. It's the one that presents the most diversity to me, and in that way, it's the one that excites me the most. And it too has some grubby colors. When I look at it, I immediately see like this periwinkle and this matte soft teal, but it also has this kind of like mustardy shade in there, which is really cool. And it even has some neutral deepening shades in it. This palette, which is the Alva 2, has really brought out my playful side, and I don't think I'm done playing with it. So I'm going to hang on to it. But I think that that definitely means for me that I can give this one away because I've, again, barely touched it. I've swatched it a tiny bit, but I haven't really applied it to my eyes. And even though I do like the color story of this, I do think that it's a bit all over the place, but it just works. Like it just hangs together. And some of these shades are really pretty. Even though that's true, I don't feel inspired by it in the same way as I do feel inspired by the Alva 2. And I also know that any colors that I wanted to put together, any looks that I was inspired to do by this color story, I could get those looks just with other shadows in my collection. So this one's gonna go. Okay, I successfully made it through that pile of Odin's Eye palettes, only keeping one. But we have yet to decide about Luster Charm from Alter Ego. When this palette first arrived, I was really excited about it. I think I said in the first video where I showed it, I said that I had been excited that it was on my vanity every morning when I had woken up. And that remains true. I still feel like it's really, really pretty. I've applied this shade a lot all over the lids. Oh, I'm going to get myself into trouble. I feel like I'm doing that thing where I was prepared to not keep it, but now I'm starting to swatch it and it's going to make me want to keep it. But I think I can let it go. What I was angling at is that even though it's really lovely, and I'm excited that Alter Ego came out with something like this, I actually feel like this is my favorite Alter Ego palette. Like it's my favorite one that they've come out with. Even though that's true, I love it and I have a lot of other shades like it, and I'm just more inclined to reach for my singles than to reach for this, especially if being able to reach for this means keeping an entire extra palette. I've also found that the special shades, or the imitations of Pat McGrath's special shades in here, which is this one, Sacred, it does swatch really pretty. It applies really beautifully. And if I didn't have, for example, the Natasha Denona Gold palette and the shade Kava in there, if I didn't have my Tom Ford single, which looks a lot like this, I would definitely keep this. But compared to those, it's a little dry. So it's always going to be like my last choice when I'm looking for something like this. Yeah, I can let this go. I love it. I think it's great. The design too. I love the packaging. I really like the cover of this way better than the other palettes from Alter Ego. I'm very drawn to it, but it doesn't mean that I have to keep it. And I think I'll be happier with a slightly smaller collection. Okay, so those are the decisions that I made about all of the palettes that have come my way recently. I decided to keep these 3 for now, and I'm going to give away this whole pile. My palettes, my little palettes. So this is my little palette collection. And you know, this is kind of just to show you, like it's sort of just a palette collection video, like an updated palette collection video. I don't know if I'm gonna declutter any of these today, but I do want to kind of go through them and consider them one by one. I'm gonna see if I can open them up and get them all in frame. Hey, gold palette. Hey, friend. I think that these quads from Rowan are going to present a problem. It's going to be harder to get everything in frame if I continue to include them. And I also know that I'm going to keep all 3 of them. I really like these quads. If I were going to get rid of one, I would get rid of the cool one. These are the 2 that I use the most, but I'm happy to just keep it. It doesn't take up a lot of space. I do really like this cool toned kind of dark taupe shade. I don't particularly feel like any of these 3 is, you know, weighing me down. So I'm just going to go ahead and show them to you, keep them, get them out of the frame. They're also kind of like blowing out the lights. Okay, I'm just going to start making decisions and, you know, talking you through, sort of gently, quickly talking you through. I'm definitely, the one that I'm holding in my hand right here, I'm definitely going to keep. This is the Flower Beauty Jungle Lights palette. It's actually great for YouTube. It's great for swatching. I often end up comparing this formula. It's a really good creamy drugstore formula that I sometimes end up comparing to high-end formulas, usually to the detriment of the high-end formula. And I do really love wearing this shade on my eyes. I reach for this a lot. Like it's one of my most worn shades. So I'm definitely keeping this. The Persona Cosmetics Identity 2 palette, a perennial favorite, one of my most useful palettes, in large part because of the beautiful matte black and matte brown, really good transition and blending shades for me. And then the colors that are in here are these kind of like deep murky colors. I just find this palette incredibly useful. I reach for it all the time. The Natasha Denona palettes, these 3 across the top, aren't going anywhere. I clearly love the gold palette. I also really love the lila palette. This sunrise sunset business, I don't actually love it that much. I don't really like the color story, but I do find myself opening it a lot. It's funny. It springs to my hand frequently. I really like this warm copper. I like the mattes that are in here, and I love the packaging, and I like the color of it. Like it's attractive to me in a lot of ways that aren't necessarily equaled by my passion for the color story, which isn't very strong, but I want to keep it. So I'm keeping the 3 Natasha Denona palettes, but gosh, I feel like the Artemis palette down here, it's great. And this too is a Natasha Denona color story, right? This is like an alter ego dupe. It's great, but looking at it here, I just feel like everything in this palette that I want to use has a comparable shade in the gold palette. Like even though there are some shades in here that aren't in the gold palette at all, you know what I mean? Like these oranges and stuff. I feel like if someone was like, use the Artemis palette to create a look, I would be like, okay, happily, because it's really beautiful. But then I would end up creating a look that I could have created with the gold palette. And even though I've had this for a long time and I've clearly gotten good use out of it, it's been really fun to demo on YouTube. I'm glad that I got to review it. And in making like vibe dupes for looks that have inspired me and palettes that have inspired me, I have found this to be relatively useful. Even though all of that is true, at this stage, I kind of feel like I'd rather just keep panning the gold palette. And I think that getting this out of the way will help me do that. And I also don't think I'll miss it. So I think I'm going to go ahead and let that one go. And honestly, I think while I'm at it, I really do love this palette, the Daydream, For a long time, again, I've had this for a couple of years, and for quite a long time, I would say most of the year after I got it, I used it a lot. I reached for it a lot. This is the best palette that actually Alter Ego has ever sent to me in terms of how much use I've gotten out of it. But looking at what's here with all the palettes open, I kind of feel the same way. Like, I think all of the looks that I might do with this, I could get those same looks with a combination of Lila and Sunrise Sunset Business. And I think that I would rather just keep leaning into them, keep panning them, and using them over and over again. Wow, I really didn't expect to be doing this, but I think that I'm okay parting with this one today too. Once again, I can't fit them all in frame, but we're left with this. These are the ones that I had put off to the side. So my collection has become more colorful today, but I kind of like that. I feel like neutrals, like the neutrals that I kept, the Natasha Denona shades, I can just lean into them and use them over and over. And y'all know that I use my singles a lot. Like this collection of palettes is just an addendum to my collection of singles, which is very versatile. So it is great that the palettes that I've ended up keeping, like this one and this one, the ones that I've ended up keeping, like that are kind of newer to me, they inspire me, they speak to me, they really like have a stance and a statement more than some of the ones that I decided not to keep today. So I feel like this is going to work for me. So this is my new palette collection. There are 9 of them, not including the Rowan quads. Quads, I mean, some people count them as palettes, some people don't. I would say that I have 9 palettes now and 3 quads. And that suits me very well. Again, especially because I tend to reach for my singles so frequently. I feel like this is just a true abundance of eyeshadows for me. And now I have a number that I decided that I'm not keeping and that I can give away. And I really love to give makeup away too. That is it. Wow, this was really fun to do. I hope that you guys enjoyed seeing my palette collection and having me talk through the ones that I really love and that I decided to keep, the ones that I enjoy but decided not to keep. And I really hope that you are taking extra good care of yourself today so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.